Hello, everyone. We are live today on Armageddon News. First of all, I want to say thank you to Armageddon News for giving this platform for Lloyd and I to talk about Islam. Today, we're going to be talking about or continuing our series looking at dhimmi status and the Jizya laws and how these are used to subjugate non-Muslims. To get us started, Lloyd, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and give a brief summary of what we talked about in the first two parts of this series.
Good evening, everyone, or good morning where you are. My name is Lloyd de Jong. I'm South African. I spent 11 years in the Middle East. I've been to a number of Islamic countries. I've traveled through them extensively. And so being there, I've been immersed in the culture, understand it a lot. And because my job was involving preventing violence, I actually started to study the scriptures to find where the source of this violence was. In that process, I read through the Quran, of course, I read through the Sunnah, and then also what I discovered was the Sharia. And that's why I started focusing my time and effort. So in the Sharia, the Islamic laws, and this is actually the ultimate source of everything that Muslims are commanded to do, because the Quran is like the seed, and it's created this forest of various things, but really the Sharia, the law, the fiqh, as they call it, is definitive, and it explains precisely how they take these commands in the Quran, take these commands in the Sunnah, and then they apply them, because Islam's a religion of law. So everything has a legal mandate. Everything has a legal basis in the Sharia. So we've been talking about what happens when you're subjugated after being conquered by a Muslim army, because it's their directive to conquer us and to make us into semi-slaves or dhimmis, which are effectively a prisoner of war, but you're something between a slave and a prisoner of war, and you're milked you're extorted for money. And so we are discussing what are the laws, going into detail into the biographies of Muhammad, as well as the Sharia laws from the very best of the manuals from the four schools of jurisprudence. And this is the bedrock of Islam. This is how and why they do what they do. So we've been discussing the laws that mandate that they make war and that they enslave us and that they extort money from us, and how they need to mistreat non-Muslims. So we've covered this in detail in the last two, and today we will do a final show. And also, we're also just doing little diversions into aspects of Muhammad's life and just highlighting certain things which are interesting, which to discuss ideas within Islam, and some of them are hysterical.
Excellent. So my name is Thaddeus, and my channel is Reasoned Answers. I do a combination of Christian apologetics and polemics against Islam on my channel. The link to both my channel and Lloyd's is down in the description box. So after the broadcast, feel free to head over to our channels and give them a look. This video is part of Lloyd and my series on what we call Islam's apologetics, the various lies that Muslims tell to themselves and others in an attempt to propagate their religion. We've looked at a number of subjects. We started by looking at Muslims who deny the truth of their own sources and how this makes them into apostates according to Orthodox Islam. Then we looked at some of the lies that famous Muslim preacher Ahmed Deedat has told in the past. We looked at how Islam codifies lying, how it has a variety of different types of lying that are a core part of the religion. In particular, we looked at how hiyal, and which is legalized lying. So Islam is a system of legal rules, not moral values. Then we looked at about abrogation and how the sources that from a Christian perspective might seem like they would be secondary, such as the biographies of Muhammad and the Sharia law based on Muhammad's life, are actually primary in Islam, that they have more authority than the Quran. Of course, Muslims would say that the Quran is primary, but what they really follow is the scholarly consensus about what the Quran means and what Muhammad did, rather than the source texts themselves. So that's what we've been up to. And today, as I said in the introduction, we're going to be continuing our look at Jizya laws, how Islam subjugates non-Muslims.
All right, yeah. Okay, so shall we just load up the presentation and
Yep,
continue?
go ahead and load that up. I believe screen sharing is enabled. Yes. We're starting to get some people in the chat, and we do welcome your comments throughout the chat. You know, the more comments we get, the more interactive we can make this, which makes it, I think, a better listening experience for everyone. Of course, we're prepared to just talk ourselves, but when we have audience feedback, that makes it a lot more enjoyable for everyone, I think.
It does. Yeah, onto something that Thaddeus said. We make the false equivalence between the Bible and the Quran. The Bible can stand alone, and the Bible does stand alone, whereas the Quran cannot stand alone. It requires the Hadith, it requires the Sirah, and also there are certain volumes that are primary, so there's a precedence and order of priority in terms of those. So certain Sirah volumes are primary, certain Hadith volumes are primary, and Hadith are abrogated as well. So not all Hadith are valid, just like Quran verses are abrogated, so not all verses are valid. Also, the Hadith can and do abrogate the Quran. And then on top of that, you also have the tafsir, the commentaries on the Quran by the primary scholars of Islam. And then you also have the Sharia laws, and then which are an exegesis of the Quran and the Hadith and the Sirah. And then on top of that, you have the fiqh, which is the exegesis of the Sharia. So Islam is a huge library. It is not a simple comparison of Bible versus Quran. That is a false equivalence. You want to find the truth of Islam, you have to look in the Sharia and the fiqh. All right, I'm going to share this, and I'm going to start where we ended off last time, just a brief recap. So this book, right, I should be up in a second. This book is from a collection called 100 Great Books of Islamic Civilization. Right? And this one is called Muslim International Law, the Kitab al-Siyar al-Sagir. There are two kinds of Islamic international law. There is public international law, and there is private international law. This one is related to private international law. In other words, it relates to minorities and foreigners living within Islamic controlled territories. And into that category falls the dhimma, the dhimmis. And so this is one of the primary volumes of Islamic international law. This is a highly authoritative and authentic manual. So notice anything that is not the territory of Islam is the territory of war. And we are the people of rebellion, and they are the people of justice. Right, so we covered this in the previous show, so let's move on. Okay, so Muhammad is greater than Jesus, and what the fiqh? So yeah, back to our little episodes on little discussions on fun facts about Islam. So this book here, the Shifa, this is the most important, the most primary, the most revered biography of Muhammad, one of the prophetic biographies. It is not as old as it is written after the Sirat Rasulullah, the one of Ibn Hisham, Ibn Ishaq. However, this one is the most important one, the most highly revered, and it tells us the Prophet was born circumcised, and he was born with his umbilical cord already cut. And his mother says he was born clean, there was no impurity on him. Another miracle of Muhammad. And if you read some of the other books, if you read through the Sirat Rasulullah and others, you'll discover that they explain that Jesus was circumcised as per Jewish law after 8 days, but Muhammad went one better because Mo was born circumcised. What a miracle. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Well, I think maybe this would explain a lot. I mean, if his umbilical cord wasn't properly attached, maybe he wasn't getting the oxygen from his mother, and his brain didn't fully develop or something.
No. I know. Yeah. Where do you go with that thought? Let's have a look. Let's continue. Aisha said, I never ever saw the private parts of the messenger. His wife said, I never ever saw the private parts of the messenger. Okay, sure. I don't know where your brain wants to wander when it thinks about that, but what are your thoughts, Thaddeus?
I don't know. Maybe she was required to be blindfolded in the bedroom.
Yeah, I never ever saw the private parts of the messenger. Now it gets even better. This is from the Shifa, right? So the link is down below in the description, if I recall. I did drop it in there. Let's have a look. Ali, his son, his adopted son, said, "The Prophet asked me to make sure that no one except me washed him. He said, 'No one has seen me naked without going blind.'" So this is when Muhammad died. He wanted his son only to wash his body and prepare it for burial, because no one has seen Muhammad naked without going blind. And these women, as you can see here, are marked safe from Muhammad today because they used eye protection. These are his wives. And this is why. I think we've discovered the reason for the niqab. Yeah.
You know, that the Islamic sources talk a lot about how amazingly white Muhammad was, about, you know, his white chest and his white arms, and so maybe his body's just so white that it's reflecting so much light from the sun that it causes people to go blind. I don't know.
It was dangerous. Yeah, exactly. Or maybe he thought he was God, and if people had to see him, they would, you know, who knows? But yeah, so none of his wives saw him naked. So he had how many? 12 blind wives? Either that or none of them saw him blind, because I don't know of reports of his wives being blind. So maybe those exaggerated tales of his virility were just that, exaggerations. Maybe he had issues in the bedroom, and this is the reason why. Sorry, can't do this with you because you'd go blind. I'm trying to save your life here.
Could be.
You know, how else do we interpret this? So anyway, so now, as we discovered, no umbilical. Well, maybe you lacked oxygen at birth. That would explain a lot. So number 2, Aisha never saw the private parts of the messenger. Yeah, it sounds legit. And was this a Viagra? The third one, was that a Viagra-related excuses for his 12 blind wives? We need to go do some research. I don't know. Please, if you guys know, drop something in the comments, drop something in the chat. But really, I think, this is from the most authoritative biography of Muhammad. And we're supposed to believe this. Let's move on. Cleanliness is next to moliness. Anas said, "I have not smelled amber, musk, or anything more fragrant than the smell of the messenger." So nothing smelled better than Muhammad. His hand was scented. It was as if he had taken it from a bag of perfume. So this messenger of Allah touched his cheek. He said, "I felt a cool sensation." And his hand smelled like it was taken from a bag of perfume. If someone shook his hand, the fragrance would remain for the whole day. If the Prophet placed his hand on the head of a child, that child could be recognized among the other children by the fragrance. Anas's mother brought a bottle in which to put Muhammad's sweat. He asked about this, and she said, "We put it in our perfume, and it is the most fragrant of scents." I'll pause there for a minute. Your thoughts, Thaddeus, on this amazing, even his poopies, as we discovered last week, smelled sweet.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't think I want to be rubbing anyone's sweat on me as a perfume.
This is the greatest man that ever lived, and we are reading about the miracles of Mo. In his great history, Al-Bukhari mentioned that when the Prophet went down a road, anyone who followed him knew that he had passed that way because of his scent. Now, here's the thing. He's not saying because he smelled nice. You know, it could be because, like, you never know. The Prophet's fragrance occurred without the use of perfume. I know what fragrance occurs without the use of perfume. We all know what occurs without the use of. And the Prophet let me ride behind him. So I put my mouth on the seal of prophethood, the mole on the back of the Prophet's neck, right, or between his shoulder blades. And it spread over me like musk.
Okay. Now, obviously, this is designed to be humorous, but these are all things that have been accepted by Muslims as being true for centuries. And there is a serious issue behind this humorous look at some of the ridiculous teachings. And that's that the so-called mere messenger, mere man, is elevated to a semi-divine status, that Muslims, regardless of whatever they say with their mouth, treat Muhammad like a god.
Ultimately, he is raised to divine status. I mean, we've spoken about how he was the very first being created by Allah. Allah took a piece of his essence and created Muhammad. Then Muhammad worshipped Allah for 70,000 years. Then Allah created a figure of Muhammad, placed it on a lamp with the illuminated the light of Muhammad, the Nur-i Muhammadi. And then the angels and the spirits worshipped Muhammad for 100,000 years. Then Allah took a fragment of Muhammad's light and made all the prophets from Abraham, Moses to Jesus. And then Muhammad was then born on earth as the finest and greatest of the prophets. So I think that really he is ultimately becomes a god. I mean, we covered that in the previous show. I think in the first one we mentioned those stories from the other biographies. So yeah, so let's see. Ali said, I washed the prophet. I began to look for what is normally found in a corpse, rotting in other words, but I did not find anything. A sweet smell came from him, whose like I have never experienced. Abu Bakr kissed the prophet after his death, and he said something to the same effect. Then Malik ibn Sinan drank Muhammad's blood on the day of Uhud and licked it up. The prophet allowed him to do that, and then he said, the fire of hell will not touch you. Miracle blood. Something similar occurred when Abdullah ibn Zubair drank his cupped blood, and the prophet did not object. A woman drank some of Muhammad's urine. Let me repeat that. A woman drank some of Muhammad's urine, his wee-wee. He told her, you will never complain of a stomach ache. He did not order any of them to wash their mouths, nor did he forbid them to do it again. The hadith of the woman drinking the urine is sound. She said, I got up and felt thirsty, so I drank it without knowing. It must have been sweet-smelling urine, too.
I guess. Maybe it smelled like orange juice. You know, she got up in the morning and she was looking for her morning orange juice.
We're supposed to believe this. We are supposed to believe this, right? If this is so amazing, if these are the miracles of Muhammad, and they call this the miracles of, why don't they talk about this? If the Sharia is so amazing, why aren't they wanting to tell us about it? It is the finest law, the greatest law, Allah's own law. It is better than all man-made laws. It must replace all law. Then why is it a big secret? Why is it a big secret? You can't talk about it. Why is it secret? If this is so amazing, right? Muhammad's miracle poop, the ground opens up and swallows it, and then a sweet fragrance comes out. Trees walked behind him and closed around him to seal him up so he had privacy when he went to take a dump. Why aren't they talking about this, that is?
I don't know. Maybe they don't actually believe that it's inspirational, that it'll actually make us want to convert to Islam.
I don't know. Yeah. So maybe some Muslim in the comments. So let's talk about the religion of bottled peace. Saudi authorities closed down a shop selling traditional camel urine drinks after discovering the owner had been filling the bottles with his own bodily waste. Right?
Oh my.
Yeah, the religion of bottled peace. And let's. So now my comments are that I'll take my chances with bacon. I think bacon is better than peace. Let me continue. Mohammedans seem to like their peace mixed with milk. In this case, they have a drink where they mix the peace, it's the religion of peace, right, with camel milk, because peace on its own doesn't seem to taste so good. And then finally, while we say in the West that revenge is best served cold, it seems that peace tastes better when fresh and warm. Any thoughts from the audience? Any thoughts from you, Thaddeus?
Well, notice how in the headline here that he wasn't shut down for selling camel urine. He was shut down for passing human urine off as camel urine. So they were perfectly fine with him selling the camel urine. It was just when he put fake camel urine on the shelf that they had a problem with it.
Yeah, traditional camel urine drinks mixed with milk.
So we did have a question.
Yep.
It says, are the Hadith considered inspired books of God?
They're called, they're secondary canon. They are known as Wahy, Wahy. They are considered the inspired works of Allah, certainly. And don't forget, the Quran and the Sharia makes it very plain that when Muhammad speaks, he speaks with the force and the authority of Allah. And also, the Quran doesn't contain his example. Muslims, there's 100 commands within the Quran that, in one way or another, tell people to follow the example of Muhammad, but you cannot find the example of Muhammad in the Quran. That's why you have to look in the Hadith, in the Sirah, and in the other books. Yeah, so religion of bottled peace. I think maybe I'll start calling it that from now on. So, Dawa manuals and training abound. So this is Mr. Expired like Ahmad Didat. And he is taking a Dawa course right now. And when he comes back, he's going to end us. Do you want to chat a little bit about that? Because I'm just going to bring up the little interaction we've had with him this last couple of days.
Yeah, so for some background, Inspired, or as we call him, Expired, has been on my channel for probably about 6 months now. He was on there before I met Lloyd, and he never gives any sources. He never makes any real arguments. It's always just empty rhetoric. And for a long time, you know, just kind of went in circles. And more recently, we've started asking him to quote the Sharia, asking him, isn't this what the Sharia teaches? And he's been caught several times where he had been trying to, in his initial post, trying to imply something like, for example, in the most recent video he was commenting on, he was trying to imply that the death penalty for apostates is not something that Islam practices. And then we ask him about the Sharia, and he eventually gets caught in his lie and has to say, yeah, I agree 100% with the death penalty for apostates.
And with the Sharia, yeah. So, yeah, just so, because we didn't really do this correctly earlier, so I am Lloyd de Jong and Thaddeus Billman from Reasoned Answers Apologetics. So let's have a look through some of his statements, and yeah, feel free to throw in your thoughts here, Thaddeus. He says, so he was telling us, it is left to the state to punish the person, not individuals. But anyways, we don't really care about your opinions. We hear and we obey. And if you don't like that, it's your business. Now, none of that's true, because we were discussing jihad, and jihad is something that can, in fact, killing an apostate is something that an individual Muslim is empowered to do. It doesn't require state sanction. There is no penalty for murdering an apostate if some random Muslim does it. So, but he says we hear and we obey. And if you don't like it, it's none of your business. And then he says, when God gives you an order, you must follow it even if you dislike it. Go on, yeah?
Yep, yeah, so this is, you know, this is the mentality that unfortunately we see quite often with Muslims, that, you know, it doesn't matter if the command seems immoral to you. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make any sense. You're not supposed to think. You're supposed to just hear it and obey it. And that's that.
Yeah. And he goes on to say that the videos are pure lies. Now, we are reading out of the very best, the most authentic of the Sharia law and the jurisprudence manuals of the 4 schools of Islamic jurisprudence. We're reading from the very best manuals. We're not going to the Quran, which can be argued back and forth. We're going, this is the law. And he has never challenged us on that. He just says, look, it's lies. Well, then what's a lie? Tell us. And we've asked him hundreds of times, please cite us from your Sharia law. If it's the best law, the greatest law, the most amazing law, then let's see it. And also compare it with Western law. Show us, because they say, you know, if you go to the Old Testament, if you go back 3,200 years ago, you'll find that God wanted to stone idolaters or stone apostates. Like, okay, that was 3,000 years ago. Islam is stoning people to death in 2020 for the same crime. Can you give us, A, the date that last time a Western country, Israel, stoned anyone to death? Can you give us a century when last that happened? And B, can you show us the law versus your Sharia? Yeah, we're still waiting for it. It's never going to happen because we know it's a lie. I mean, if you've got to go back 3,000 years, for an example, you might be reaching a little bit, right? And he says, I fully believe in this punishment, and I'm beginning to see the wisdom behind it. Just look how these apostates misguide others. Yeah, murder them for having opinions you don't like. And he tells me, Lloyd, jihad includes fighting for what's right, and I'm proud of it. I want to die a martyr. Told me this today. He wants to die a martyr. That's great. That's great. I hope the security services are listening and will. He is called the Lion of Islam 1 on Twitter, and he's based in London, to my knowledge. And Lloyd, your kids will live under Sharia and will pay the Jizya or else. And I also hope the security services shoot you in the face. Now, you are willing to do violence, I asked him, to enforce your deceitful, low IQ Mohammedanism on us, as you are commanded. And here's Thaddeus asked him, do Muslims say jihad does not include violence? Because he said, do Muslims say jihad does not include violence? And we both said, yeah, lying Muslims do all the time. They deny jihad is violence. And he says, I don't know what Mohammedanism is, but I'll surely do it for the one true religion, Islam. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Yeah, it here being commit violence, just to be clear. And yeah, he tries to play these games, but he's a keyboard jihadist in training, so to speak. He's not very good at this lying yet. So he'll say something like in his original post, which is designed to be technically true, but give the opposite impression of what you're saying. Like in his original post there, it was about how the apostates aren't to be killed by individuals, they're to be killed by this. It's up to the state whether they're killed or not. And of course, we know what the law for the state is. And of course, in Islam, there is no difference between the state and the religion. They're one and the same thing. So what it really is if there's a caliphate, then the caliphate decides the punishment. If there's not a caliphate, then it's up to the individual in charge to decide the correct punishment.
Correct.
And on the specific topic of apostatizing from Islam, there's no disagreement whatsoever. Everyone agrees that the death penalty is demanded. The only disagreement is on details. Like some schools of thought think that women are exempted from the death penalty, and others think that women
3 days grace
can be executed as well. Some say that you should wait 3 days to give the person a chance to repent. Others say do it right away. But they all say that the death penalty is warranted, that the death penalty is demanded, and that there's no other option for an apostate.
Yeah. Now, if he's so proud of this, why won't he cite the law? And why does he lie to us and say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're lying, you're wrong, you're lying? And then he says, okay, fine, yeah, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, and this isn't the first time that's happened either. Like on previous videos we've done, he starts out saying, you're wrong about what you said at minute 5 and 16 seconds. And then we go on, and at the end, he's like, yeah, well, I basically agree with everything you said. I don't have any problems with what you said.
Yeah.
So,
and also, we said so. Yeah.
So he tries to act like we have no authority, that we're lying about Islam. But then in the end, he basically agrees that we're accurately teaching what Islam teaches, and he more or less agrees with everything.
And if we're wrong, why can't he cite us the correct? If we're citing the corrupted version of the fiqh or the Sharia, why can't he cite us the correct one? Why? He will not name. We've asked him, what's your favorite Sharia manual? Name us your preferred Sharia manual so we can all read it. Show us the one that shows that Islam is not a religion of bottled peace. And still waiting. So yeah, let's go on then. So just briefly about Dawa manuals and training. So we went and have a look at Dawa. Muslims are trained. Your online, your very low quality, low IQ Islamic apologists are trained. They go on courses. These courses are fairly in-depth. You read their manuals. Some are very short, like introductory, like this one. Others are very sophisticated, very detailed. They actually have scripts. So basically, they analyze the target. Is it the Jehovah's Witness? Is it a Baptist? Is it a Catholic? And then if it's, depending on which it is, they tell you how to lead into the conversation, how to open the conversation, and then how to conduct the conversation, how to lead the questions, and how to lead the person you're speaking to, and then how to contradict them, how to trap them. So this is something Thaddeus and I have mentioned that we might want to discuss in the near future. Your thoughts there, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I think that it would be helpful to go through one of these manuals, because you'll notice if you spend any time talking to Muslims online that you hear the same things over and over and over again. And if you know exactly what to expect, then you can have your answer prepared. And since they're for the most part, not thinking for themselves. They're just going through a script. They'll be thrown off and they won't know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, something to do, something that we need to think about. Now, notice this is taken from one of these manuals by Bilal Phillips. So in terms of the rejection, when we say, well, there's no religious freedom, well, this is to answer the Muslim. This is to give the Muslim inspiration in terms of their Dawa. Those who leave Islam are executed. Objection to Islam is often raised against the death penalty prescribed for apostasy or abandonment of religion. Since religion in Western civilization came to be looked at as a personal choice which cannot be enforced by either church or state, to execute a person for leaving his religion would naturally seem extreme. To murder someone for leaving his religion would naturally seem extreme. Where's the freedom of religion here? This is what they are justifying, and they have to. They're forced to justify this. Western civilization executes its citizens for giving away state secrets. Okay, well, that's a crime. And here's the odd thing, even in Islamic countries, and in fact, if you go through the Sharia, I can point out exactly where in the Sharia it says, if you give away the secrets of the Muslims, you can and will be executed. So this is a national crime. Yes, for treason, anyone in all countries, Muslim or not, you'll be executed. And they mentioned that, but this is something material, but they do it too. And Islamic law prescribes the death penalty for something far more serious than treason. Rebellion against God is a far greater crime than rebellion against state secrets.
Yeah, and the funny thing here is that they're trying to compare leaving Islam with
treason.
With treason, but that's not like remotely similar at all. If you're pretending that Islam is like a country, then something comparable to leaving Islam would be immigrating to a different country, leaving your home country to go to another country. Treason is like selling the secrets, actual secrets of the government. Just by leaving Islam, you're not giving away any secrets. And if you talk about things in Islam, you're still not giving away secrets, because anyone can go and read the same materials that you got that stuff from. So it's not at all similar.
Yeah. But this is what they're forced to believe, and this is how they stretch the truth. And there's no compulsion in religion, right? No compulsion in religion. Quran 2:256, legit, no compulsion. Awesome. So let's have a last look at this before we move on to the, so this is from a couple of different sources. So this is Dawa is Easy online. This is Oscar. Do you believe that Jesus is God, or that he was somebody sent by God? And this is called a Jesus technique. And this is a sample, one of their Jesus techniques. So if they say Jesus is God, then you must say God is all-knowing. But Jesus said he didn't know the hour or the day of judgment, right? That's how you confuse the Christian. God is the greatest, but Jesus said the Father is greater than I, John 14:28. God doesn't ask for help, but Jesus prayed and asked for help. So how can he be God? Or if they said, no, he was sent by God, then ask them, was Jesus the Son of God or a human messenger of God? And there's this flow chart. So they are leading the conversation to trap you, and they are taught specifically to go through the script and follow it as it is. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Well, first of all, I want to clear up some confusion. In the chat, it seems like William is under the impression that we are supporting Islam. I'm not quite sure how he got that idea, unless he's talking about someone in the chat, but I think he's talking about us.
Well, he's saying Christianity was never a religion. He's one of those, either he's a Muslim probably pretending to be a Christian, or one of those really weird Christians that aren't really Christian.
Well, like he says like, that guy is someone with a serious problem. This guy is a snake. I don't know where you got the idea that we're supporting Islam. We're reading the Islamic sources so that people know what Islam teaches, but we most certainly don't think that anyone should be following these things.
Yeah, the host should study Islam, the Quran, and Hadith, so he knows what he's going on. That's fascinating. That's really interesting. Like, I don't know what those things are. And yeah, we're revealing what is actually taught within Islam. And that's very interesting.
Yeah, so
this is confusing.
Yeah, I think he's just, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if he's not really listening or what, but I don't see how anyone could be listening to us and think that we're supporting the material that we're reading.
He's also just comment spamming. He's just comment spamming at this point. William, stop. take a deep breath and listen, or I will make you disappear. Just take it from me. So let's move on. So for instance, this is another example. Dialogue with a Christian. Start here. Except Jehovah's Witnesses. See, they're very specific. They have one for Baptists, one for Catholics, one for this, one for that. Excuse me, do you follow any particular religion? Yes, I am a Christian, Catholic, Anglican, Church of England, born-again Christian. Can I ask you a question? Do you believe that Jesus is God? Or Jesus? And they have another flow chart. They have another step-by-step, and they learn this script. Do you know that there's only one religion which says that Jesus was sent by Almighty God? Huh? Do you know which religion that is? No. Well, it's Islam, and so on it goes. And to learn techniques that prove the Quran is a miracle, blah, blah. Your thoughts before I move on, because we'll get back onto the subject at hand and get off these.
No, I mean, I just find the dialogue a bit humorous, because I've seen this so many times that in practice that obviously in online chat, they don't type in the exact question, but they do type in the conclusion that says, Jesus said that he was sent by God, therefore he can't be God. Ha ha ha, you people.
Yeah, so it's all here, and we can take this apart one day. Okay, so let's move on. Let's finish up so we can then just get done with talking about Dhimmis and Jizya. Right, so we'll get back to the Sharia. So this is Tafsir al-Qurtubi, the classical commentary on the Holy Quran. So Qurtubi is really nice because he writes really blunt tafsir, blunt explanations of what goes on in the Quran. They will have disgrace in this world, and in the next world, they will have a terrible punishment. So Qatada reports that the word disgrace refers to killing in the case of the harbi, that's you. And jizya in the case of the dhimmi, that's also you. So the harbi is someone who fights them. A harbi is also someone who lives in the lands of war. So that would mean that they must go and kill you, and if they've conquered you, you must pay them money if you don't become a Muslim. So disgrace, they have these wonderful euphemisms like disgrace in this world. And of course, the people who will then disgrace you are the Muslims. They are the ones who will pursue God's justice in this world, Allah's justice, which is to murder you for not being a Muslim. As for cursing unbelievers in general, without specifying anyone, there is no disagreement about doing that, since Malik reported a statement with an isnad going back to blah, blah, blah. People used to curse the unbelievers in Ramadan. Oh, well, it's in Ramadan now, the holy month. The holy month is when you spend time cursing the Christians. Interesting. Muslims should spend the holy month cursing Christians. Our scholars add, whether or not they are dhimmis, this is not mandatory, but it is permitted if someone does it, cursing you, because they deny the truth and they are hostile towards the deen and its people. The same applies to anyone who commits acts of disobedience openly, like drinking wine and consuming usury. Drinking wine. So Islam does allow, and if not mandates it, certainly tolerates it, if not encourages it, cursing those who are not Muslim.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, Ramadan is the holiest month of the year in Islam, and we would think that during the holy month, people would dedicate themselves to their religion and come out more peaceful and loving and such, because that's what would happen if Christians really dedicated themselves to studying their religion. Yet every year during Ramadan, acts of violence, acts of terrorism increase substantially. Is it a coincidence, or is that the result of people dedicating themselves to what Islam teaches?
That one, B. Yeah, so as for those whose harm is feared, not who have done bad, but if you suspect or fear, you think they might, in respect of planning or providing advice or giving monetary support against the Muslims, in other words, if they are captured, the ruler can choose between 5 options: killing them, an act of goodwill, ransom, enslavement, slavery, or agreeing to become a dhimmi in return for the payment of jizya, extortion. So this is what they have for the dhimmis. This is what you get. Let's have a look at the history of al-Tabari. In practice, payment of these taxes amounted to an acknowledgement of social inferiority. So Muslims, remember, they're the best of creatures and you are the worst of beasts. That's what the Quran says, right? And so paying the jizya means you are acknowledging your social inferiority to the Muslims. So if you spin around 3 times and you say there's no God but Muhammad and Allah is his puppet, you suddenly become superior to everyone else who's not one of you. So dhimmis, as a mark of their social and religious degradation and second-class citizenship, So Islam is the original apartheid religion, right? And they have a second-class citizenship compared with the Muslim Arabs. The poll tax is a favor that the Muslims do for their non-Muslim subjects, one for which the latter, the non-Muslims, the Christians and the Jews, should be grateful. Why should you be grateful? Because they haven't simply just killed you.
Mercy.
That's Islamic mercy, exactly. That's Islamic mercy. So what is the money spent on? Well, let's have a look from the Reliance of the Traveler, the world's most famous, most authoritative Sharia manual, or manual of sacred law, as they call it. Money should not be put to unlawful use, such as building a church. That would be unlawful. Why are they building all these mosques in the West? Well, because tolerance. Or purchasing lamps for a church, objects of worship, obviously, for church. This assists disobedience to Allah. So they must not allow this to occur. The same is true of an endowment for printing the Torah or the New Testament, which is invalid because the Jews and the Christians have altered the texts and they've added spurious or false material. So doing so is to participate in their disobedience to Allah. Now, on this point, I'll say that David Wood's been doing some amazing work with Sam Shamoun in refuting Muslims' claims about the corruption, because the Quran makes no such claim. However, it doesn't matter what. The Quran is in many ways irrelevant, any relevance in Islam. The Quran is simply quoted in its true context and interpreted by the scholars. So if you read through the Sharia and the fiqh, right, and you come across the ijma, the Islamic consensus of the scholars, which is the main legal framework within Islam, it simply says, they simply make the statement that the Bible is corrupt, it is altered, it is false, it is no longer the same, and that's it. And Muslims have to accept that no matter what the Quran says. They can't go against it. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Yeah, this is one of the things that you always hear over and over again in online chat, that the Bible is corrupted and whatnot. And I think it'll go back for the most part to the comment we looked at from Expired by D. That you hear it and you obey it, or in this case, you hear it and you believe it. It doesn't matter. You don't need evidence, because I've challenged countless Muslims to give me any evidence whatsoever that the Bible is corrupted. And about the only thing they can ever come up with is there are two different endings to the Gospel of Mark, and 1 John 5:7-8 is has a few extra words added in later versions.
Well, to which I would say, show me any two hadith. You know how many hadith have different endings, different beginnings, different middles? How many hadith are contradictory? And show me any two Sirah manuals, biographies of Muhammad, that are identical. Show me. Seriously, you just won't find it. They do not exist. They want to tell us that the Gospels are, dude, look through the Sirah. Find me two Sirahs that match like this. Doesn't exist. But you see, slight differences in perspective from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John discredits Christianity. But radical, complete contradiction in the Sirah, no, that's legit. Sure.
We were just joined by Sanya Azam in the chat. So hello, Sanya.
Sonia.
Thank you for all your support. The series never would have got started without you. So
yeah, hey, welcome. Yeah, so let's move on. So the Jizya. So we've got the tafsir and the hadith. Now these links are in the comments in the description box below. You can look. There are numerous tafsir commentaries on war tribute, right? The Jizya. I went through those previously. I wonder perhaps I should do that. Should I do that now? Just go through some of those comments, especially from. Okay, so give me one moment. I'm going to actually have to. I'm just going to stop sharing because I realize I need to bring that up. I forgot to prepare that document. So let me just get to that.
no problem. While you're working on that, there was some chatter earlier about how the attributes of Satan in the Bible and Allah in the Quran are very similar. And that would definitely be a good subject to go through at some point. The most obvious connection is that in the Quran, Allah brags about being the greatest of all deceivers. And of course, in the Bible, Satan is the father of all lies.
Correct. Okay, I'm ready. Right, so these are the commentaries. I'm not going to go through the Jizya hadiths. I'm only going to go through some of the tafsir so you can see. Now, the tafsir are the authoritative commentaries. These are the commentaries from the best scholars of Islam. These opinions, these legal opinions, eventually made their way into the Sharia and made their way into the laws of Islam, the fiqh, right? And they became the binding fatwa that established the laws of Islam. So let's have a look. It says here, Ibn Abbas, the cousin of Muhammad, fight against those who have been given the scripture, the Jews and the Christians. I think that's pretty blunt. And do not submit themselves to Allah until they pay the tribute, being brought low, abased, until they are humiliated. Let's continue. Tafsir al-Jalalain, the two Jalals, fight those who do not believe in Allah, for otherwise they would have believed in the prophets who do not forbid what God and his messenger have forbidden, such as wine. They do not practice the religion of Islam, the one that abrogated other religions, namely the religion of Islam. So Islam abrogates all other religions. Your religion is cancelled. Islamic doctrine teaches that Christianity is Deen al-Batil. In other words, it is the void religion, the cancelled, the worthless religion. In other words, for a Christian to pray is like, it is absolutely without value. It is just empty air. That's their view. That's the doctrinal view of Islam. Namely, the Jews and the Christians, until they pay the jizya tribute, the annual tax imposed upon them, compliantly by their own hands, being subdued, being submissive and compliant to the authority of Islam. In other words, you will submit. Ibn Kathir. So, pure in religion and person, expel the idolaters who are filthy in the religious sense. That's you. From the al-Masjid al-Haram, idolaters were no longer allowed to go near the mosque because they were, the mushrikun, that's you, are impure, unless it was a servant to one of the people of the Dhimma. And Umar wrote to his governors to prevent the Jews and Christians from entering the mosques of the Muslims. Verily, the mushrikeen are impure. This ayah indicates that idolaters are impure and that the believers are pure. You are filthy. The believers do not become impure. In other words, they can do what they like. Now, they always say, well, Jesus forgave your sins, so you can do what you want. You can have sex with dogs. I've seen that. And, you know, it's okay because you can forgive it. You're forgiven. You can do anything. You can be immoral. Well, the believer does not become impure. Interesting. So how about we have a look at, take the log out of your own eye first, buddy. If you fear poverty, Allah will enrich you out of his bounty. And where do they get that bounty? That's a good question. Well, from you. They steal your money. So if you fear poverty, Allah will enrich you from other resources from those who feel themselves subdued. This will be your compensation for the closed markets that you feared would result from warfare, from going on war, jihad. Allah compensated them for the losses they incurred because they severed ties with the idolaters by the jizya. So you Muslims will be compensated and enriched by the jizya they earned from the Christians and the Jews. Allah compensated Muslims for their losses by the amount of jizya they took from the Dhimma, the Christians and the Jews. The order to fight the people of the scriptures until they give the jizya, so they fight you to take your money. Fight against those who believe not in Allah, the people of the scripture, that's Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya and feel themselves subdued. When the people of the scriptures disbelieved in Muhammad, they had no beneficial faith in any messenger or what the messengers brought. In other words, they simply have no belief whatsoever. Rather, they followed their religion because this conformed with their own ideas, with their lusts, and with the ways of their forefathers, not because they are Allah's law and religion. Had they been true believers in their religions, their faith would have directed them to believe in Muhammad. So if you were a true believer, you'd believe in Muhammad. The man whose poop literally did not stink, the man whose wives would have gone blind if they saw him naked. Because all the prophets gave the good news. So Jesus and all the prophets were speaking about the advent of Muhammad, the good news, the gospel is the coming of Muhammad, and commanded them to obey and follow him. When he was sent, they disbelieved in him, even though he is the mightiest of all messengers. Therefore, do not follow the religion of earlier prophets, because these religions came from Allah, but they follow them because they suit their desires and their lusts. Fight against those who believe not in Allah, right? So fight the people of the book, right? And they go on. So fight the Jews and the Christians, and he prepares his army to fight the Romans, and he called his people to jihad. So gather forces and collect an army. Paying jizya is a sign of kufr and disgrace. And we know what happens. When they say disgrace, it means killing. That was defined for us a little earlier. So we must pay them money in defeat and subservience, right? They must be disgraced, humiliated, and belittled. Muslims are not allowed to honor the people of Dhimma or elevate them above Muslims, for they are miserable, they are disgraced, and they are humiliated. This is from the finest scholars of Islam. This is the exegesis of the Quran. This is 929, right? Quran 929, this is the exegesis. This is how they should treat us. If you meet any of them on a road, force them to its narrowest way, right? Ensure their continued humiliation, degradation, and disgrace. When Muslims came to us, we requested safety. We have to request safety for our children, our property, and the followers of our religions. We made a condition on ourselves that we will neither erect in our areas a monastery, a church, or sanctuary, nor restore any place of worship that needs restoration. Muslims who come as guests will enjoy boarding and food for 3 days at your expense. We will move from the places we sit if Muslims want to sit there. That is the original Apartheid religion. They will refrain from erecting crosses on the outside of our churches, and we will not sound the bells in our churches. Well, then we should silence the azan, shouldn't we? And nor will they buy servants who are captured by Muslims. Oh my, slavery. These are the conditions that we set against ourselves and followers of our religion in return for safety and protection, in return from the Muslims, of course. If you break any of these promises, you are allowed to do with us what you're allowed of people of defiance and rebellion. And the final one is Maududi. Christians and Jews were guilty of shirk. Their profession of belief in Allah was meaningless. They did not believe, right? And the Jews and Christians have polluted their faiths. The second reason why jihad should be waged against them is that they did not adopt the Sharia sent down by Allah through Muhammad. The aim of jihad with the Jews and the Christians is not to force them to become Muslims. That's a lie, because it is. You read elsewhere, and adopt the Islamic way of life. They should be forced to pay the jizya in order to put an end to their independence and their supremacy. They should not remain rulers and sovereigns in the land. These powers should be taken from them by the followers of Islam, who should assume the sovereignty and lead others towards the right way. They should become their subjects and pay the jizya. Jizya is paid by non-Muslims who live as dhimmis in an Islamic state in exchange for security and protection. They will willingly become the subjects of the Muslims who perform the duty of the vice-regents of Allah on earth. At first, this command only applied to the Jews and the Christians, but then it was unanimously applied to all non-Muslims in nations outside Arabia. This is jizya. Muslims have been feeling apologetic during the last 200 years, right? And he's saying, no, the rebels, because of, they want to give an apology to the rebels against Allah, that's us. But the Muslims should feel proud of such a humane law as that of jizya. The Islamic State offers them protection if they agree to live as dhimmis by paying jizya. They cannot and they should not remain supreme rulers in any place and establish wrong ways and impose them on others. It is the duty of true Muslims to exert their utmost to bring an end to their wicked rule. I'll just stop there. I think that's plenty. This is what
I think we got the gist.
Major scholars, it's disgusting. And then, the final section. So the last few slides. So any questions, any comments on that? Because we'll start winding up.
Well, I have a question for any Muslim, and that's, if you are proud of the jizya law, as the commentary we just read said you should be, how come you always are denying it on YouTube? How come you're always trying to hide these things from us on YouTube? Do you know that these laws are not really just, or that we won't perceive them as just because they aren't? I mean, why are you hiding them? If these are honorable things that you should be proud of, why are you hiding it?
Yeah, exactly. I've been asking that question, and they won't talk about them. So let's have a look at the Hedaya. I mentioned this last week. I discussed this in detail, the importance of this book, the actual critical importance of this book in Islamic law. It is when you study to become a qadi or Islamic judge or an imam, this is the final legal manual that you study because it is the most detailed. So let's have a look at some of the contents of thefts which require amputation. On the manner of cutting off the limb of a thief. You can find that here. And it's looks like it's 19 pages worth? Interesting. Let's have a look on the manner of waging war. Jihad. You'll discover that this is jihad. On the manner of waging war, And there's a whole bunch. There's like 100 pages of this here if you read through this long enough. So interesting. They have the laws of waging jihad and of plunder and the division thereof. So plunder, interesting. And of the conquest of infidels. Oh my. Of tithe and tribute and of jizyat and capitation tax and of the laws concerning apostates. So this is the Hedaya. This is a very detailed, it's 2,652 pages of detailed Islamic law. This goes into dozens of pages. This book is like 800 years old. So it goes well. So we've read through, I think last week in some of the reviews of the Hidayah, correct, Thaddeus? So the importance of this book cannot be exaggerated. It was and still is referred to in all courts in Muslim India. It is studied in most Hanafi-based schools and Islamic universities. It's a comprehensive and detailed book widely used in Hanafi Islamic law. It is reliable, its statements are sound, its legal reasoning is sound, and so on and so on and so on. Most researchers and scholars first consult Hidayah before they move to another source. It has been the major source relied upon by courts in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. So yeah, I guess someone's going to say this book is fake and they've been doing it all wrong. Well, for 800 years, right? So you let them know. It represents the refined, distilled, and authentic version of a legal tradition developed over many centuries. It is a classic book of Islamic jurisprudence for Islamic faith. It covers blah, blah, blah. It's authentic. Right, so the guidance, it says here, it has been the primary text used by Muslim jurists to issue authentic and reliable rulings on Islamic law for 800 years. The Hidayah commands such an authoritative position amongst the doctors of law that the knowledge of a scholar who has not read it is not considered reliable. Interesting. It's a standard text in the curricula of Islamic law schools since the 12th century. All previous works that discussed Islamic jurisprudence according to the Hanafi law became outmoded and fell into disuse. Never has a book received so much attention as the Hidayah. Fascinating. I think we can just go on, right? The man who wrote it was considered to be the leading jurist of the Muslim world in his time, and it is celebrated as the most practical and useful compilation of Hanafi jurisprudence. It is a standard text, blah, blah, blah. This thing is solid. And this guy is the research fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic, Dr. Muhammad, whatever, at Oxford University. And it just goes on and on. This book is solid. It is top notch. Right, moving on. So the last 10 pages, we will be done. Jizya is war tribute from Dhimmis. So because as an apostate, he has forfeited the protection of the law. So actually they do mention that you're in the same category as an apostate. You have forfeited the protection of the law. Now, notice that they speak of tithe and tribute, and they speak of tribute and the hire of slaves, because 70% of the Sharia is about slavery. And they speak upon a tax upon the persons of Dhimmis, which is termed jizyat, or capitation tax. And they speak here of, we are enjoined, we are required, we are commanded to make war upon the infidels of Arabia until they embrace the faith. And this was extended to the whole world eventually. Omar subdued Iraq and imposed tribute. And then he conquered, Ibn As conquered Egypt and imposed tribute upon the inhabitants. And in the same manner, imposed tribute upon the people of Syria. And then the Imam, whenever he subdues a territory by force of arms, so the Imams are supposed, so your Imam in your mosque is a war leader. Now, a point I should make that is that when we say the Sirah, right, which is today, the term is synonymous with the biographies of Muhammad, the term Sirah in the early beginnings of Islam meant war. And the Sirah was the manual of Muhammad's warfare, the example of his warfare. So the term Sirah became from a manual or instruction guide on Islamic warfare, then became the biography. The biography contains his political and military methods.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the Imam, whenever he subdues a territory by force of arms, imposes tribute upon their lands and capitation tax upon their persons. So the lands which the Imam subdues by force of arms are subject to tribute. It is a necessity that something be imposed and deducted from the infidels, and this bears the construction of a punishment. It is a hardship. The tax upon tribute land being due, although he should not have cultivated it. So if you own land, you own money on it, whether that land has been cultivated or could be cultivated or not, right? And the Prophet even conquered Mecca. Now they speak here of taking territory again by force of arms. The Prophet conquered that territory by force of arms, not a religion of peace, religion of bottled peace, as we've discovered, yes, but not regular peace. It is written in the Jama Sagir, and that's this book here that we covered earlier. right, that all land subdued by force of arms is subject to tribute. So now they go on, chapter 8 of Jizya, to capitation tax. Jizya is of two kinds. And the second species is that which the Imam himself imposes where he conquers infidels. That's you. The Prophet spoke generally without making any distinction. Capitation tax is due in lieu of destruction. So if you pay money, they won't kill you. By destruction, they mean killing you. Capitation tax serves as an aid to the troops of Islam. So you pay the money so they can continue their warfare against the non-Muslims, against the infidels, Christians, the Jews, and anyone who's not Muslim. There's a punishment. So you won't join them in killing for Islam. So while you got to pay the money so they can go kill for Islam. Capitation tax is due in lieu of assistance with person and property. Capitation tax is imposed upon the people of the book because this is mentioned in the Quran. And Shafi, so that goes on, so it is imposed as a return from the mercy and the forbearance shown by the Muslims as a substitute for the murder, the death, the destruction, which is due upon infidels. So you are actually due to be destroyed. But if you give them money, they won't kill you as long as you can pay. And that assistance, which every subject of the Muslim government is by law required to give towards carrying on the war with the infidels. Your thoughts?
We have a good comment from the chat here. Axtrap says, tax and jizya are not the same thing. Jizya is a sign of imposed subjugation. That's completely correct. Well, it's just called a tax because it's a monetary. The purpose isn't so much to raise money. Of course, the caliph or whatever will appreciate the money it raises, but its main point is to make the people pay it feel humiliated.
Yeah, that's required. Yeah. Now, Shafi, this is the founder of the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence, one of the four major schools, if not the major school of jurisprudence. He argues that destruction or death is incurred by all infidels in consideration of a capitation tax. Right? So all of us should be killed. We should all die, but maybe we can give them a little bit of money. So subject to the original penalty, which is destruction. Isn't that nice, a euphemism? Why don't they just say, we're going to murder you? The opinion of our doctors is that it is lawful to make slaves. It is lawful to make slaves. That's fantastic. And by reducing them to slavery, they are deprived of power over their own selves. They're deprived of power over their own selves by the imposition of capitation tax, the jizya, because they must work and they must pay the Muslims the produce of their labor.
Well, that's actually a really good quote there, because it's saying that the purpose of the tax is the same as the purpose of slavery, is to make you completely subject to the people in power, that you no longer have any sense of freedom, that you feel yourself being submissive to them. Yeah.
Yeah, this is disgusting. This is what they are. This is how it is. And if a Muslim, so jizya, slavery and extortion is law. So if a Muslim army subdues an infidel territory, right, before capitation tax is established, the inhabitants, together with their wives and children, are all plunder. You become war booty and the property of the state, as it is lawful to reduce to slavery all infidels. You are a slave. It is lawful.
You know, we hear from time to time that Islam doesn't allow slavery, that Islam is the religion that liberated the African people. What a bunch of nonsense. Islam approves of slavery. The Quran approves of slavery. The Hadith approve of slavery. Muhammad owned slaves. Muhammad traded slaves. He bought slaves. I mean, it's just such nonsense to say that slavery isn't part of Islam. It's an integral part of the traditional sources.
Yeah, and why don't they quote us the law? Because Islam's religion of law, why don't they quote us from the Sharia? I know the Sharia forbids them from doing it. They have to be silent and hold the secrets. But if it's so amazing, there's a reason why they're hiding it. And it goes on. Their infidelity is of such an atrocious nature because they have apostatized after having been led into the way of faith and made acquainted with its excellence, the religion of bottled peace. So in other words, you have been made acquainted with the excellence of the religion of bottled peace, and yet you still refuse to accept it. Now, I'm not going to accept the religion of bottled peace, whether it's been heated or whether it's cold. I'll tell you that. But they must embrace the faith or be put to death. Shafi holds, that's the head of the Shafi school of jurisprudence, the founder, holds that it is lawful to make slaves of the idolaters of Arabia. All right. And it goes on. So dhimmis make slaves of them. And upon being conquered, they become public property. You become the property of the state. If a Muslim army conquers the idolaters of Arabia or the apostates, their wives and children are plunder. So this law was eventually just extended and expanded to the whole world. Siddiq made slaves of the women and children of the Binti Hanifa tribe when they apostatized, and he divided those slaves among the troops, and he killed such of the men as did not return to Islam for the reasons before assigned. So they will murder the apostates. So you are lumped in with the apostates here. The same laws also apply to you as to them. Capitation tax is not imposed upon slaves or Muslims because capitation tax is a substitute for death. And with respect to us, it is a substitute for aid in the wars of the faith, the holy wars, the jihad. It is a substitute because you're not willing to go and kill foreigners who've done nothing to you so you can spread Islam and force them to become Muslims. You have to go to pay money so the Muslims can get them.
We had a question
Sure.
a little while back about what do they use the Jizya money for, and I think we just got a pretty strong hint there that it's used to wage war.
Yeah, it's used to beautify the city, to build a nicer palace and so on. It's for the benefit of the Muslims, of course, but yeah, certainly it is used to wage war. It is used to expand the caliphate. It is designed to expand the caliphate to fund the necessity of them making the whole world Muslim. And that doesn't necessarily mean only kinetic, understand? It doesn't necessarily mean that. They've got other ways of doing this as well, silent ways. Capitation tax may be imposed on those where they are capable of labor. And a monk is not to be killed where he does not mix with mankind. Although they could just kill you and, okay, well, too bad. I mean, we discussed it last week where we talked about there's a penalty if you do this, but if you do, well, whatever, move on. Capitation tax with respect to them would be for the purpose of warding off their death or destruction. Likewise, capitation tax, which is the consideration for protection, right? So again, you will lose, so protection money, like the mafia, protection money. And secondly, capitation tax is a species of punishment inflicted upon infidels on account of their infidelity, whence it is termed jizya, which is derived from jizya, meaning retribution. I have Muslims lying to me about this all the time, but it says it here in the Sharia, right, in the fiqh. It means it's punishment. Punishments are instituted for the purpose of removing evil, which is removed by either death or Islam. So, in other words, evil, you being evil, not being a Muslim, should either be killed or become a Muslim, because if you're not one of those, you are evil. Thirdly, capitation tax is a substitute for aid to the Muslims, aid in their war. Your thoughts, Thaddeus? We're on the last 4 or 5 slides.
Yeah, I think we have a really perceptive audience today because shortly before you went over this slide, Axtrap was saying that Muslims give their own justification for the jizya tax. They say it's imposed for protection against more radical Muslims. And here you are comparing it to the mafia. So I just thought I'd point that out, that 2 slides in a row, you've anticipated a question.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, let's continue. First, capitation tax is a punishment inflicted, notice inflicted, okay, upon infidels for their obstinacy in infidelity, in refusing to accept Allah, in other words. And it must be exacted in a mortifying and humiliating manner. So they must take it from you in a way that humiliates and terrorizes you. You must feel fear and humiliation when the collector receives the money from you. So according to one tradition, the collector is to seize him by the throat. So they've got to grab you by the throat, shake him, saying, "Pay your tax, dhimmi." It is therefore evident that capitation tax is a punishment. So capitation tax is a substitute for death. That's what destruction means. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, again, it just really sounds exactly like mob protection money. You want to keep your
Yeah.
shop open, you better give us the tax. And
Yeah, remember the last time I did this on your channel, I actually read through like 20 pages like this. I've cut this down to like 7 pages. So
yeah,
I've got like less than half of what I had there before, and it just goes on like this for dozens of pages.
well, as we saw earlier, there's 16 pages on the proper way to cut off someone's hands alone. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I guess, why are you so ashamed of your Sharia? If you're so proud of it, if it's the best law and the whole world should serve under it, why don't you talk about it? We can sit down and chat about it. You can tell me how you're going to kill me, and then, we can take appropriate action. But I don't know what's wrong with these people. I don't know why they're so afraid of revealing this. So now we go on to why there are no other religions in Arabia. This is part of the Dhimmi laws. The construction of churches or synagogues in the Muslim territory is unlawful. This is forbidden in the traditions. That's the Hadith and the Sirah. Dhimmis should not be permitted to celebrate the tokens of infidelity. In other words, your religious ceremonies. And it goes on to say, in the territory of Arabia, dhimmis are prohibited from constructing churches or synagogues, either in cities or villages, because the Prophet has said 2 religions cannot be professed together in the peninsula of Arabia. Hopefully that answers a couple of questions. Why Saudi has no churches? I've been to Saudi many times. It's a dump. Good God, it's a miserable place.
yeah,
Right. So, yeah.
As you may recall, last week someone was trying to tell us that Saudi Arabia is not only allowing churches, but they're paying for them.
Sure, send us the address of that church, right?
Yeah, that was one of the funniest things that I've seen claimed.
I mean, how do they justify this? How do they lie? They're not lying to us. They're lying to themselves. I mean, do they really think they're lying to us? It's right here. How is their opinion of any value whatsoever? So the Imam has to make a distinction between Muslims and dhimmis in the point of dress and equipage. It is therefore not allowable for dhimmis to ride upon horses, or to use armor, or to use the same saddles and wear the same garments or the headdresses as Muslims. It is written in the Jama Sagir. I showed that earlier. That's that book of international law, Islamic international law, in this case, private international law. The dhimmis must wear the kiftij, which is a sign of, basically it's a little band, like, the Star of David on your arm to show that you're not a Muslim. They must wear that on the outside of their clothes, also called the zunnah. And the kiftij is a woolen cord or belt, which the dhimmis wear around their waist on the outside of their garments. Hitler got that idea, as we discussed, from the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. If they ride upon an animal, they need to provide themselves a saddle like the panniers of an ass, in other words, a wooden saddle. So Muslims are to be held in honor, contrary to dhimmis who are not to be held in honor. Therefore, non-Muslims are not saluted first, and if there were no outward signs to distinguish Muslims from dhimmis, they might be treated with the same respect, which is not allowed. It is not allowed to treat non-Muslims with the same respect as Muslims. You're not allowed to wear a silk belt. It is requisite that the wives of dhimmis be kept separate from the wives of the Muslims, both in the public roads and in the baths. It is required that a mark be put upon their dwellings. Dhimmis are not permitted to ride at all, except in cases of absolute necessity. He must get off his horse, or actually he's not allowed to ride a horse. He's only allowed to ride a donkey. He must alight wherever he sees any Muslims assembled. And if there's a necessity for him to use a saddle, so you're not allowed to use a saddle, it must be made in the manner of the panniers of an ass, basically made of wood. Dhimmis of the highest orders must also be prohibited from wearing rich garments and submitting. So the thing in virtue of which the destruction of dhimmis is suspended, so your death is suspended by submitting to the jizya, not the payment thereof. So they want you to submit, and the submission to it continues. And they mentioned Shafi again. I said that the contract of subjection is dissolved by blaspheming the Prophet. So if you insult the Quran, or you insult Muhammad, then your contract of subjugation, slavery, right? Humiliation is dissolved, and you are now an apostate, and you will be treated as one. And hence, your protection is thereby broken. Your protection is broken, and the contract of subjection is merely a substitute for belief, because you won't believe, they give you this little mercy. The argument of our doctors is that this thing in question has been made obligatory by the terms of a peace, and women are capable of being subject to such obligations. Interesting, women are exempt. Okay, so what they tell you, if you read the law, it says that women are exempted from paying jizya, except women also have to pay the jizya, which is like, huh? That's Islam. Like, women are exempt, but women have to pay. So, yeah. The dhimmi, upon breaking his contract of subjection, stands in the same predicament as an apostate. He is condemned to death. Yeah, there you go. And if the dhimmi is made captive, he is a slave, contrary to the case of an apostate, who, if he repents, is not put to death. Thus, he would be a virtual apostate, and he forfeits the protection and privileges of a believer. And we're on our final slide. This is it. We end here. Any thoughts before I finish this last one? Is that
we have some off-topic chat, but we'll wait till after the slides for that. Hey, it's good material, but we'll wait till after the slides are finished.
Okay. So of zakat, twice as much is levied upon the property of Christians as is levied upon the property of Muslims, because Omar made peace with them upon this condition in the presence of other companions, none of whom disputed it. Twice as much is taken from the women. Now, if you go back, if you read through the rest of the book, and I've linked it, it's the link to this book is in the description. Get it and read it, right? This is volume 2. So you'll see that it said women are not subject to the jizya, but women have to pay the jizya, and women have to pay twice as much. That's amazing. And the above peace is established on the taking of a double zakat, and zakat is incumbent upon women. And it says here, this is jizyat, the name in which, and name it whichever ye please, jizyat or zakat. And there you go. And this is where we end.
Excellent. I think that was a lot of good material to think about how the Sharia law encodes this subjugation, this humiliation, and how it's done through monetary means or other means. As you also looked at the material, having to wear different clothing, not being allowed to build churches, that kind of thing. So what the chat has been talking about, and there's a couple different opinions here, is why are seemingly a large number of people from Muslim countries wanting to immigrate to Europe? Let me give a couple thoughts and then you can give yours. So I think that there are a variety of motives. There's certainly some people who want to escape the Muslim lands because they've left Islam and they fear for their lives. So that one's pretty straightforward. And I'm sure not what the question was directed at. I think that in a lot of cases, what happens is the people are very unhappy with their situation, but rather than realizing that it's Islam, the system, that's causing the situation, they blame it on the particular person or people who are in power. So they say, there's nothing wrong with Islam. What's wrong is the particular ruler we have in my country. If I go to another country and I implement the same legal system there, it'll be better. I think that's why you see people who are
it's not real communism fallacy. It wasn't real socialism. It wasn't real Islam. It's exactly the same thing. It's not real Islam.
Right. Of course, they're mistaken, but I think that's probably why you see people who are leaving a situation, because I mean, your situation has to be pretty bad for you to want to leave your country, right? So they're leaving a situation they consider horrible, but then they're trying to reinstigate the same situation in a different area. Well, and I think that's happening because they don't really realize what is the core cause of the problem.
I'll also add to this, though, that they are required to immigrate. It is a form of jihad. They receive the full measure of paradise from a life. They die in the process. They will go to paradise like a jihadi does, like someone who died in jihad. And the year 0 in Islam is dated from the year that Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina. So that is the year 0 of the calendar, not the birth, not his death, but his hijrah, the Hijri calendar, the migration calendar. And jihad, migration is a form of jihad. And also rich people are required or heavily encouraged to provide wealth, right? Remember those who give their wealth and their lives in jihad, right? So rich people are encouraged to fund migration as a form of jihad. Someone is paying. How does a poor African who makes $1, $2, $3 a month, how does he pay $7,000 to cross the Mediterranean to Europe? Where does he get that? He would take him 50 years to earn that in salary. Where does he get $7,000? Well, someone's paying it, right? So many of these now, also, if you look at the numbers of people that believe in Sharia, the Muslims that believe in Sharia, it's a large number. In some countries, it's 90%, 90-odd%. So many of them are coming for the purpose of spreading Islam by slow infiltration. They're forcing Islam, and we are letting them in. We are the house of war to them. We are the people of war. So there's a very sinister, dark side to this, and you have to know this and push back. This information needs to be made public. These laws have never been cancelled. They cannot ever. This is the law of Allah. Cannot be cancelled ever. It must replace your law. So there's a danger to this as well.
Yeah, I was hoping that you would go there, because I think there are two sides to the story here. In some cases, people are desperate and want to leave their situation. In other cases, they think they're doing something noble by going to another country and spreading Islam.
Yeah, well, Guy Shin says, how about 2 million Syrians? Now, look, I've been on the border of Syria. I wasn't allowed to go in at the time. For what a long story, I wasn't allowed to go into Syria and Iran, but I've been along the border of Syria for various reasons. And 70% of the refugees that come into Europe can't read and write in their own language. So, I don't know how they're going to be future doctors and lawyers. You tell me. They don't even read and write in Arabic or their own home languages. So yeah, it's an time. Can I tell you a story? I don't know how true it is. I've never actually looked up the historicity of it, but I was doing some work in Lebanon. Lebanon is where the light switched on for me. Really, the light went on for me in Lebanon, because I saw what happened to a Christian country, how it was just ruined. And I went to this one base, and coming back from the base, they took us past this encampment. There was this huge, it looked like a prison wall, like a huge, really like a 20-foot wall around this place. And I asked what this was, and they said that was a Palestinian refugee camp. And there were thousands of Palestinians in this camp. And they actually showed me the helicopters, and they showed me the place where they're loaded. I'll get to that in a moment. And they said there were thousands of refugees from Palestine that lived there. And the Lebanese government gave them everything: libraries, schools, pressures, hospitals, money, you name it. They took good care of them. And shortly after, teams of jihadis would sneak out from this place and started murdering people, started car bombs, assassinations, attacks in the streets, and it got bad. And it went on like this for a very long time. The government did everything in their power. They said, well, if you give us pressures, if you give us milk, if you give us schools, if you give us better textbooks, if you give us whatever, better healthcare, whatever, they kept complying. And I think a year or so later or more, a couple of years later, the problem was just escalating. And what the Lebanese government did was they loaded 1,000-pound bombs on their helicopter squadron. They loaded them. They showed me where the loading bays were. I went there. And they realized that no matter what they'd done, after about 4 years, they got nowhere, absolutely nowhere, right? The problem was getting worse. People were dying, and it was causing terror. At that time, there's about 20,000 people living in this refugee camp, right, with a 20-foot wall. They built this wall to keep them in. And he said they went to the blocks where the jihadis were known to be encamped amongst the people. Now, don't forget, if you're like this woman, they talk about the human shields. Well, they're doing that voluntarily. They're doing that because they will earn the love of Allah, and they will earn paradise if they protect the jihadis. So this whole human shield thing, those aren't victims. Those are willing accomplices, right? Doing a holy deed, a great deed for Allah. They killed 4,000 people, I was told. Okay, they told me they killed 4,000 people, men, women, and children. They just slaughtered them. They dropped these bombs. They decimated every block where these people were known to be until they demolished the buildings with 1,000-pound bombs. And when everyone was dead, the problem went away. So this is one country that took that step. Now, they've still they won the battle. They lost the war. And I fear that Lebanon is going to be the future of Germany. of Paris, of Belgium, of Holland, if people don't, because there's going to be bloodshed if we don't speak about this. I would rather speak about this than have to shoot people in the face. But
Yeah, exactly. That's why we're here. Well, one of the reasons we're here, one of the main reasons. We want to refute Islam. We want Muslims to watch this material. We want people to share it with Muslims. We want to stop it before it becomes a war.
Yeah.
So Axe Trap said that with the high birth rate among Muslims, they'll be taking over Europe in the near future. It's already starting to happen. The UK has become a new hub of ISIS and so forth. Let me just offer a counterpoint to that. It is true that Muslims, even in Western nations, have a high birth rate and thus, in theory, are growing. However, when you look at the actual statistics, I think the growth of so-called growth of Islam in Europe is due almost entirely to immigration. And when Muslims come to the West, about 30% apostatize from Islam when they're no longer forced to, when they one, get out of the cultural bubble of this is normal, everyone accepts this, and two, when they actually look at things critically.
Yeah.
A significant percentage realize that Islam is a lie and they end up leaving the religion. So there is hope here. It's not just a case that that no one ever leaves Islam and that Islam's just going to keep growing and it's going to take over the European states. So I there is the aspect that we do have to take this seriously. This is a serious problem. This is a serious threat, but at the same time, there is hope that it's not just a predetermined fact that no one will ever leave Islam and they'll just keep growing and kill everyone.
I think the apostasy laws, and without the heavy enforcement within the culture, they would have Islam wouldn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, you have Islamic scholars saying the same thing, that sometimes they have a few excuses for justifying the apostasy law, and the funniest to me, which you hear periodically from Muslim scholars, is if this didn't exist, Islam would have died out. It's like, well, yeah, because it's crappy. Not that's their because they think Islam is true and they don't want it to die out. So they're like, oh, that justifies the law. Now we know why it exists, because people would leave Islam if it wasn't there.
Yeah, but you've got normal Muslims who believe in the Sharia, who want the violence, who are waiting for it, and there are many who believe Islam is so amazing because they don't know. So there's those who are actually lying because they know and they think it's righteous and justified to commit murder on behalf of Islam, and there's those who are just ignorant and have no idea. So hopefully this educates both sides and warns us of the dangers of these beliefs, and two, warns those Muslims who have no idea what the facts are. Otherwise, bring me Sharia laws that say something else. I'd love to see it. They don't exist. Good luck, but
Yeah, and I think that everyone watching can take their own small steps to helping with this problem. Maybe you don't have any Muslim friends and you can't talk directly to a Muslim, but you certainly can talk to your Christian friends about this material. Large majority of Christianity doesn't think that this is a real problem, that it's only a few so-called extremists that believe in this sort of thing. And whilst I agree that there are many people who call themselves Muslim who live completely peacefully and have no interest in pursuing this kind of thing, they do so at the ignorance of what their religion teaches. The core documents of Islam make it very clear that Islam is to be propagated by war when necessary, that it is a complete system. It encompasses every aspect of life, political, religious, economic, everything. If you are in proper compliance with Islam, then everyone is Muslim and everyone is doing exactly what quote unquote Allah wants them to do.
Yeah, so this is not, I know it's horrific. I mean, it's horrendous, horrific. It's almost unbelievable, but this is Sharia law. There is no other Sharia law. There's no other legal system. This is it. Enough Muslims believe it. At least half do, if not more, read the Pew Research statistics on it. At least half. It's probably closer to 70% that even in the West that to some degree believe in this. And if there's a problem, they're going to side with their own side. They're raised to be victims. They're raised to see us as bad. They hate you, right? It's religion that teaches hatred, and they lie. And we hopefully will start to uncover more of this. There's lots more to come, but I mean, it depresses me to read this. It's depressing. It saps me sometimes to just think, who thought this up? What kind of depraved, sick mind? So yeah. I've seen this. I've been all through the Middle East. I've been to almost every country. It's nuts. It's the same everywhere.
Oh, by the way, Guy said that he's actually from Lebanon, and said that's right. About halfway through what your story about Lebanon. So at least the first half of it, he's approved as being accurate.
Okay, yeah. No, dude, I can tell you, for instance, a lot of things happen in the Middle East. I mean, I've been to a lot of fun places. I can tell you that, right? And there's a lot going on. There's a lot happens. I mean, there's full-blown wars can occur and not a peep in the news. Trust me, you have no idea what can go on, and not a word appears in the news. All right, been there, done that, seen that. Trust me, or don't, whatever. Don't have to take my word for it, whatever. But I can tell you, you can hide slaughter on a massive scale and not a word gets out. No one cares. You'd be amazed what goes on. Yeah, I can't tell those stories, but they're stories to be told. So yeah, so things happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and along the same lines, he says that Lebanon today is on the verge of war.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, Lebanon is a beautiful place, but it was really sad. The Bekaa Valley was interesting, man. It was crazy to go to the Bekaa Valley. That's good grief. It was a mind bender. Been there a few times. Wow. I remember growing up as a kid in like the Bekaa Valley, the news when back in the 80s, the Bekaa Valley was, and then I went there and I was like, wow, nice place. Completely messed up. Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, those are stories for another day. So yeah, that's Jizya. That is, and all they can do is lie now. I think we're at the point now where, in terms of our polemics, Muslims can only lie now. At this point, they've got nothing left. They can't talk about the Sharia. They're not allowed to. They know we're right. So they can only lie. And so use these polemics, use this information, and let other people know about it so that no one can continue to push their lies, and that those Muslims who don't know can be woken up and realize the dangers. This is a legal system that wants to replace yours. And talk about this. You need to get this information out, make it common knowledge.
Jiku said, asked if he could ask a question, and then he went ahead with the question. I actually have no idea what he's going on about. So
never mind. It's prophetic stuff.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer because I have no idea what you're talking about. It appears to be some sort of mystical belief that he's asking about.
Yeah, that's outside of.
It's outside of our expertise. So no answer to that question, unfortunately.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope that was useful. And so that's it from me. I mean, this is it. And I could have actually added a ton more, but I think I've made it very clear. I've extracted, what was essential. And I hope that was useful. And I hope you've learned a lot about the ridiculous disease called Islam.
Excellent. We do have one more question before we close out. Xtrap asks, what's your view on Western converts to Islam?
Look, remember, I'm someone who leaves Islam, never knew Islam, but when you enter Islam, you can enter Islam with knowing literally nothing about it. You spin around 3 times, they pat you on the head, you say, there's no God but Muhammad, and Allah is his puppet, and bang, you're a Muslim. You're good to go.
Yeah, and if you look at the statistics of, or even if you just go to your local mosque and ask how many people are converts, you won't find barely any. They were all like
more than 70% of converts leave within 2 years. Almost all of them leave within 5 years. They've quit within 5 years or less.
Yeah,
because they wake up when they go, what the hell was I thinking? This is nonsense, and they go.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that 70 to 80% leave within a year or two, and then when you look 10 years down the line, it's like well over 90% have left. And part of that's because, I mean, most of these so-called converts were never converts at all. Someone convinced them to say the Shahada, and that made them a Muslim, but they didn't believe anything about the religion. They probably never went to mosque once after quote unquote converting. So I don't think there's very much actual conversion.
Yeah, Islam's not spreading by conversion. It's really spread by violence, warfare, in other words, and traditionally, and of course through childbirth. But again, I think if we can weaken this, it's an information war we are waging because they're lying to us. They're learning. You saw their Dawa. They're learning, and this is something we have to start deconstructing. And I mean, their polemics are weak. Their apologetics are weak. They've got nothing, and I think we can start to just steamroller them. And why do they have to lie about their own texts? I mean, they've got nothing.
Yep, I agree completely. Truth is on our side, and in the information age, people can no longer be completely shielded from the truth the way they could be in the past. So I think it's just a matter of time before you see substantial cracks in the Islamic world. It will be happening slowly, but it will appear all at once, because what will happen is, there'll be a few people leaving, a few more people leaving, but you won't see anyone leaving because everyone's too afraid to say anything. And then at some point, there'll be a crucial mass of people who have left Islam, and suddenly they'll have enough numbers to stand up and say, we've left Islam, and then it'll look like a whole bunch of people left in a year or something.
Yeah, I think it's not going to stand. I don't see it. It's evil, it's vile, and it needs to be destroyed. And hopefully we're a part of that. And look, Muslims make very good converts. That's worthwhile doing.
Absolutely. I think that's a good positive note to end it on. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We'll be starting a new series probably next week. Look for an announcement on the exact day. We'll be taking an extended look at jihad next on Armageddon News here. And at some point, probably also next week, we will start to look at refuting Ahmed Deedat's arguments about finding Muhammad in the Bible on my channel. So stay tuned for that. We hope to see you all again. Enjoyed the chat today. Have a good afternoon, evening, morning, middle of the night, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. God bless.
Radio, hopefully I'll have a haircut by the next time we meet. We're great to get that going again. And also one thing I'd love to discuss is the Crusades. We should really do something about that sometime and really just nail that one. That would be part of jihad, I guess, maybe after that. Okay, thank you, everyone. Good night. Take care. Good to see you all again. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Stay safe. Bye.